Hey 670. So I'm gonna walk you through today's lesson. Today's lesson is on analyzing the structure of stories. And let's look at the directions. So we know that the classwork is due today at 2:40 p.m. So I want you to open up to page 153 of your Ready workbook. So it's gonna look like this, right? Now notice how it says you do not need to fill out the chart. This is the chart that I'm talking about. You do not need to fill out this chart, right? I'm going to read this to you and walk you through it. And on my version, it actually is filled out. So let's start from the top. So today's lesson is on analyzing the structure of stories. Stories are made of words. Authors build those words into sentences and paragraphs, and if the story is really long, chapters. This is pretty obvious. What's less obvious is how these parts work together to develop a story's theme, setting, and plot. When you think about how a story's parts work together, you're thinking about the story's structure. So that's what we mean by structure, right? How all the parts of a story work together, right? One way to analyze a story structure is to ask yourself this question: how does a specific sentence or chapter help develop the story? You can do something similar with cartoons. So, right here is a cartoon, and we have two different panels, and each of these panels are part of a longer or bigger story. So, we want to ask ourselves, what does each panel contribute to the setting and the plot of the longer story? So, here we have a boy. He says, "We've been walking for hours. I think we're lost." Then in the next panel, he says, "I think I broke my ankle." So she's thinking, it's not safe here. Do I leave him and go for help? Or do I stay with him until we're both found? So now let's look at this chart below. And it's going to help us analyze what each of these panels contributes to the whole story, right? So on the panel on the left, right, we know that the two characters are in a forest, right? That is the setting. The characters are in a forest, right? That's all we know. So that's the contribution to the setting. The left panel's contribution to the plot is that the characters have been walking for hours. Remember, when we say plot, it means the events that happen in a story, the events that make up a story, right? We also know that they are lost, right? So that's how this panel contributes to the whole plot of the story, of the cartoon. Now let's look at the right panel, right? In terms of the setting, which is where the story takes place, this contributes to the setting in such a way that we know that the forest is not safe. In terms of the plot, what happens in the story, the right panel contributes to the plot by in such a way that the boy has broken his ankle, right? And now the girl must decide what to do next. She's not sure exactly what to do, right? Now, when we talk about both these cartoon panels put together, the entire thing, the theme we could say is that the panels, when taken together, they suggest that the story's theme is about how people should act when in danger. Now, as you read, you want to stop and ask yourself, how does this section of the story build on what came before? How do these pieces help develop the theme, setting, or plot? So, doing this type of thinking will help you understand not just what a story tells, but how it tells it, right? So, basically, what you want to think of is how the setting contributes to the story, right? How the various plot events that happen in how the various events that happen in a story contribute to the entire plot, right? Remember that a story is made up of parts, And when we think of that, we're thinking of structure. All right, now, excuse me a second. Okay, so that was this page. And remember, we are skipping 154 and we're skipping 155. And now we are reading from Tracker, right? You want to read from Tracker and answer these 3 questions. All right, now I'm going to go to my version and I'm going to read through that with you. Just a second, this thing's slow. Sorry, guys. All right, here we go. All right. Oh, gosh. Sorry, guys. Having technical difficulties here. All right. From Tracker. So let's also, we know that the genre is an adventure story. And let's read from the top. And as a matter of fact, whenever we have these texts, you want to look at the close reading hints, right? So in this excerpt, the setting is not directly stated. We want to circle clues in paragraph 2 that suggest the setting of the story, right? John Bourne always hunts with his grandfather, but this year his grandfather is dying of cancer. John can think of little else. As he goes looking for a deer alone, he hears a noise. It was a releasing sound, as if a branch or tree which had been held had been turned loose. A kind of swoosh, and back to his right, and he froze, waiting for another sound to guide him. None came. So let's look at this right here. According to the introduction, John is looking for a deer. And we wonder if he's going to find one. So we're going to look for signs of a deer in the story. Paragraph 2. He turned and took 2 steps, then 2 more, and so covered a distance of perhaps 30 yards until he came to a deer bed. It was a yard across, where snow had been melted down to bare swamp, grass in a cupped little warm place under a stand of willows. So these are the 2 words that we can circle that give us some clues about where the story takes place. All right, let's continue. He knelt next to the bed and felt the grass, and it was still warm. That had been the sound. A deer had been here in its storm bed, and he had walked past it, and it had jumped up, apparently hitting the willow on the way. It must have surprised the deer, his coming, because the first tracks were more than 10 feet from the bed. The deer had bounded up and away. The next tracks were 20 feet from the first ones, out into a clearing and across, craters in the new snow where the deer had run. Well, he thought, I was close to one anyway, even if I didn't know it. It came to him suddenly that he hadn't thought about his grandfather for nearly an hour, and he didn't know if that was good or if that was bad. So, we want to wonder why this is boxed, right? It says, how does hunting the deer help John? Draw a box around details in paragraph 5 that show how the deer encounter affects him. So, this is boxed because this shows us that the deer encounter caused him to not even think about his grandfather for nearly an hour, right? Because he was so concentrated, he was so focused on the deer encounter, right? So, let's go on to the next page. All right. So I'm just going to read the questions out to you. You're going to do these answers on your own, but I'm going to guide you on how to use the hints, right? So the first question says, in the first sentence, John hears a swoosh and looks around. How does this sentence contribute to the story? All right, so let's use that hint. How do the clues about the deer lead into the rest of the story? All right, so think about that first sentence, right, of the story and how that contributes to the entire story. Question 2 asks us, how does paragraph 2 develop the setting of the story? Remember, the setting is where the story takes place. How does paragraph 2 develop the setting of the story? Right? Think of which answer fits best with the clues you circled in paragraph 2. Let's go back to what we circled. We circled snow and we circled swamp in paragraph 2, right? So, which answer fits best with the clues you circled in paragraph 2? Finally, question 3. Describe how the final sentence, the last sentence of the story, contributes to the plot of the story. All right? Use details from the story to support your answer. To think of what does the last sentence tell you about the main conflict of the story. When we say conflict, we mean the problem or the issue, right? Now, keep in mind that this is a short response question. So remember to restate the question, right? We could say the final sentence contributes to the plot of the story because, or the final sentence contributes to the plot of the story by, and then when we say details, use two details from the text. So first we restate by saying the final sentence contributes to the plot of the story because, then we answer the question. Then we could say one example from the text is, or according to the text, it says, and then we can say another example is. All right, make sure you use rad, just like how we've learned in class. All right, that's it for today. I hope that explained everything to you. And let's try to step it up this week. All right, see y'all later.